Welcome back. First Alert. New research says child concussions are often misdiagnosed. Aisha is at the First Alert Safety Desk. What are you learning?
Well, Emerson, we know concussions are often linked to car crashes or contact sports, but concussions can happen to anyone, even young children. New research from Nationwide Children's Hospital says smaller kids don't always have the words to share their symptoms, so concussions are often missed or misdiagnosed. And a new report says because of that, about 1 in 4 kids younger than 6 years old who suffer a concussion will develop prolonged symptoms. So if you think your child has a concussion, so important to see a doctor because identifying those symptoms early can help the child avoid those long-term issues. In this latest report we're talking about this morning, researchers found that when kids between the ages of 0 to 6 years old suffer a concussion, it can lead to different symptoms like behavioral changes. They get more irritable, there's appetite changes, decreased socialization, stomach aches, increased dependence, or clinginess.
These symptoms can affect their daily lives. They can affect participation in things like daycare or school if they're in school at that point. They can also affect parent-child interactions.
The study found that up to 33% of young children with a concussion will have persisting symptoms at 1 month. The next step in this latest research is to figure out how to best treat those symptoms for younger kiddos, whether it's through pain management or changes to their daily activities. Emerson and Steve.